So now let's talk about my favorite topic, which is structuring. What is it about? Well, it's about disaggregating. That's the keyword, right? Complex problems into distinct components, facilitating the formulation and dissection of hypotheses. We don't structure just for the sake of breaking things down. We do it for a purpose, which is to create and organize our hypotheses, which are the things you can take action on, right? You can explore. Why do we do it? Because complex, non-routine problems, they often resist straightforward understanding and resolution. We know that yes, you have to approach things. Sometimes it's too much information, too messy and tangled in order for you to even talk about it with someone. And how do we do it? We segment problems into specific buckets, right? Such as focus areas, categories, drivers. Structures, they can look very differently. These are, let's say, 3 shapes they can manifest themselves into. For instance, trees, very common. Then mind maps. You can go all directions. It doesn't matter. You can do it in a mural. And also indented paragraphs are structures, of course, right? Any Word document or contract and so on. And legal documents, they can have this dot dash structure as well. Now, you probably heard a few things and maybe you use structuring already on a daily basis, but then I will focus on 6 things that you probably didn't know about problem structuring. Let's focus on those less known aspects so that you learn a few more things. So the first one, consultants use that a lot, is that you can have a day 1 answer, right? Even with just like in the very beginning of your exploration, you can already have a hypothesis. In daily life, right, we already use the hypothesis-driven approach. For instance, if you lose your keys and you want to find them, then we naturally prioritize places where they could be first. Maybe a drawer, maybe a pocket of a jacket, and so on. You wouldn't look for it in the shower, unless you came home really drunk last night. But as humans, we already have the hypothesis-driven approach. So we already look, we have a solution in your mind and we pursue it, right? And that's what we often don't do in business, which should be always the case, right? Given the time constraints. So you must always be oriented towards a destination. That's your hypothesis, right? This guides you and prevents you from getting lost in irrelevant data. And now there's too much data everywhere. There's too much information. For instance, if I ask one of my associates to do interviews with 20 people, they will all tell different things and give a lot of interesting information. They will come back to me and they will report on a million different things they found out. But if I give them a clear hypothesis to test, they focus and they only filter those things. It's very different, right? And they ignore the irrelevant data. And it's normal if your hypothesis is wrong. Like that's the game, right? That's what Christopher Columbus did in 1492 when he revised his plans to get to India. Now, the second thing I want to tell you is that just to distinguish, right? Problem trees are often confused with solution trees and vice versa. Like you have to think about what type of tree are you making? And there are many different kinds, right? So you can do a structure or tree that is a topic tree, right? Focus on the problems, on the issue, right? For instance, I am losing money, and then you list all the factors that you can control and you cannot control, right? I'm here on the top. And you can have a solution tree where you want to solve it already, like how to accumulate more money, right? And spend less, earn more. And this tree can be written in topics, questions, or hypothesis formats, right? You're free to decide whatever makes more sense and feels more natural to you, right? If you have very little time, I go for usually to the topics. I just break down the keywords. And if we have more time, if you want to make it more understandable, you can write the full hypothesis as well. Let's see an example so that it doesn't get so fluffy and difficult to visualize. Back to our project on expanding the market for interior design. So with my sister on the phone, I also interviewed her and we broke down this question: why are low-income families not seeking and purchasing interior design services? And we came up with this hypothesis, many more than I initially thought, right? They're not aware of it. They find it expensive compared to the value. They don't trust service providers. That's another one. They believe they have the skills to do a good job themselves, and they don't have access to financing tools, right? We expanded a lot more. And we went to the second level, right? I'll not read everything, but for instance, in the awareness part, of course, maybe they don't know what interior design is or how the service works, right? For instance, in the expensive bucket, we listed what is value in the end of the day of interior design, right? It's more than there's the surface value, because it's aesthetics and functionality, okay, ergonomics and comfort, but also self-expression and belonging, right? Create an environment that you feel good and belong in it, and so on, right? And you have here other, the service providers is very interesting, because lower income families, they use it to buy products, which they can see and touch, and they know what they're getting. But if you pay for a service, it's intangible. You really don't know what's gonna be in the end. And that uncertainty makes them very anxious about spending money, right? And financing tools is also important and everything, right? So consultants love buckets so much that these BCG consultants literally put buckets on their presentation and to check how many, like it was a project for a public sector client in Dallas, right? To get rid or decrease the population of stray dogs, right? And they did the full analysis. Is a very interesting case. It's also available online. Next, you must only use MISI breakdowns. Maybe you heard about this concept, but let's review it. MISI stands for mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, right? And here this picture represents it, because being collectively exhaustive means that we cover all the potential space, whether the problem or solution space. And being mutually exclusive means that the factors don't overlap and they are not influencing too much, or they are interdependent, right? So we try to make them as clear and clean as possible and separated. I often use the example of drugs, medicine, right? So when you take a pill, you want it to act on a specific thing and be mutually exclusive and not cause any collateral effects, right? Essentially, this is, when we have something that is not mutually exclusive, then it usually causes collateral effects. You have to consider many other implications. And there's a technique to break things down in a MISI way, right? In Highbridge, we developed this one called photo and film, quantitative and qualitative. Again, it's okay if we don't have time to go super deep into each one here, but in summary, we have breakdowns that are photos because everything pretty much happens at the same time. There's no sequence, and film, where there's a sequence and a time component, right? And of course, we have quantitative and qualitative, which you understand intuitively as well, right? Let me give you a couple of examples. Quantitative photo is a mathematical breakdown, right? If things are mathematical and they add up, or you can subtract, multiply, and so on, then they are MISI, right? They don't overlap. They are separate categories, and they are exhaustive if you add all the elements. They can get very complex. This is, for instance, a ROI analysis, right? In a consulting project to compare different years, right? And this helps understand where the problem is. And another example is the qualitative photo, let's say drivers, right? For instance, what factors affect the profitability of a coffee shop? And here I'm mentioning a few things. You might seem familiar for some of you, right? The Porter 5 forces. And here it's, of course, there's the other bucket as well, because other means that everything else goes there, and it makes it collectively exhaustive as well. Okay? You can put these smaller factors. Some people ask me, Flavio, if it's five forces, where's the fifth? I disagree a bit with Porter. I put client bargain power and alternatives together here in client's power, right? Because having alternative is having power. So for me, it's more like 4 forces. Fourth, you must always try to slice it in different ways. And this is very insightful because if you break things down differently, you have different types of insights. For instance, increasing your salary, you can increase your hours worked or your salary per hour. Those are quantitative factors, but you can also think about drivers, external factors, personal factors, and then break it down in other insights. And those two together, they help you, right, have a better picture. So often I ask my team to break down individually so that we see what everybody put in their first order, first level. And we learn with that. This one is very interesting as well. 5, you may not have a top-down framework. Oftentimes we're facing different new problems and we don't know the recipe to break it down, right? And then what do we do? Well, here's how we approach it. So we have the method of order first. If you know a framework that you can use it, for instance, market entry or due diligence, right? You already know what are the categories. Then you can use that and brainstorm hypotheses based on that. But in other cases, for instance, me and my sister, we didn't have a framework for why are people not buying interior design projects. So we had the hypothesis, and then we aggregated them in areas, and this helped us have more hypotheses. But we started with the chaos first, right? Just the brainstorming. So when unsure about what is the breakdown, that's the best way to do it. And here AI helps a lot because if you give ChatGPT a problem, it will give you ideas. This is for sure probably one of the best applications, right? ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, whatever model you use. And finally, if you're not iterating your structure, you're failing to learn, right? You have to revisit, update it, and make it visible. If you have an office, put it on the whiteboard so that people can see the structures when they go to grab a coffee, when everybody like in the team room is there. Like it makes it very, it's alive, essentially. Okay, and also it's a team sport. Structuring effectively is a collaboration, it's not a solo endeavor. So I would recommend you to not try to be the hero and figure it out. Show your structure, show your output and ask for feedback. What am I forgetting? What else? How else can we look at this? And so on.